Welcome, everyone, to this week's Messy Conversation. We'll get started in a few seconds, give people a little more time to find their way. Um, I don't know about you, but when I tried to log on, I had to install a new version of Zoom for some reason. So maybe people are going through that.
Yeah, same with me. So maybe so.
Okay. Well, in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to Messy Conversations. This week we're going to be focused on, we heard there's an election coming up. I don't know if you've heard this. And so a lot of people have a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts, and we thought it would be a good time to come together and hold some space for that and try to offer whatever insight and questions and maybe a modicum of wisdom along the way. So thank you for finding time in your Monday to join us. A couple of quick announcements. There won't be a messy conversation next week because it's Veterans Day holiday. So we'll be honoring that and taking next week off. We'll return on November 18th when Clarence will be leading a conversation with two uh, guest conversationalists on racism as a public health issue. And so that should be really interesting. So we hope that even with a week off, you'll remember to come back on the 18th. And as always, you're encouraged to bring a friend. We always run a 2-for-1 deal here. So two people get in for the price of one. So bring a friend to that messy conversation. As always, if you have comments, questions, critiques, anything that you want to bring into the conversation, we ask that you first put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And after the initial conversation between today, it'll be Asa Wilder, Beth Mabry, and myself. Um, after we converse for about a half an hour, we'll bring you into the conversation and call on you to bring your questions and comments in. So until then, we ask that you keep yourself muted. It helps the flow of things because we don't have background noise. And I think that's it by way of introductions and announcements today. So I wanted to give each of us, Asa and Beth and myself, a chance to briefly introduce ourselves, and then we'll launch into the conversation. So we'll start with our new guest, Beth Mabry.
Well, thank you, David. It's quite auspicious to be with you all this evening, like literally on the cusp of history. Um, I live outside of Pittsburgh. I identify as a white, cis, lesbian, she, her pronouns. Um, and I don't know, I feel queasy. I feel queasy these days, like I'm sure a lot of us do. So I'm just going to be glad to be with you all in my queasiness. How about you, Asa? Are you queasy too?
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit like that feeling on a roller coaster as you're being pulled up very slowly, and there's some ledge coming. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but something's happening soon. Yeah, and that queasiness is definitely there. I, for those who don't know, I'm Asa Wilder. I'm the librarian on our AULA campus, so I'm based in Los Angeles. I'm originally from, quote unquote, flyover country, as they call it on the coast, in Kansas City, Missouri. And I work with the undergraduate students throughout Antioch. And I'm also part of this Messy Conversations planning team. And I'm really glad and honored to be in this conversation with David and Beth. And yeah, there's that queasiness for sure. David, how are you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, the same as you and probably everyone else. As much as I value uncertainty, sometimes the temperature gets turned up on uncertainty where it's rather uncomfortable. So I'm looking forward to our conversation together today. I think everybody here probably knows me. I'm one of the original what were instigators of Messy Conversations. There's a couple of us still around. And I'm on the AULA campus where I've been teaching since 1989. So glad to be here with you. And so we want to start with you, Beth, and maybe before you answer this question, you could also just say something about which campus you're on and so on.
Oh, I did not place myself in the Antioch community. I apologize. I'm a faculty member in my 5th year in the graduate study of leadership and change. And so I don't really have a campus. Every one of your campuses end up being our campus when we come to residency there. And we really love that and appreciate the welcome.
So thank you, Beth. And when we were talking the other day in preparation for this, one of the things that struck me is the part of the way that you framed your wrestlings were how there's this large macro kind of level, but then there's also this like really deeply personal level. And I wonder if you could start us off by saying something else about that framing.
Yeah, somebody asked me the other day if, as a sociologist, so that's my discipline by training, but I really think of myself as pretty multidisciplinary. As a sociologist, do I see things coming, in the bigger picture earlier, and how does that affect me? And I don't know that I do, but I certainly sort of think both in the bigger picture, and I think like a lot of us do. And that's one of the things that's been so poignant to me in being part of this community in the last several years is that we come together sometimes and folks are just so saturated by what's going on in the world and overwhelmed by what can I do about it. And this is really this is big, this is huge, and I don't know what to do, but I feel the suffering or I feel the threat or the risk. And that's way out here. It's happening on the other side of the world, or it's a huge, issue or problem, or, people are hugely suffering. What can I do about it? But then I have my own life, right here to take care of. And what can I do to keep going? And that tension between those macro level factors that I think because of the era we live in with the 24-hour global news cycle, we're aware of so much more. At the same time, we have to keep our organizations going. We have to prepare ourselves in our own lives. I was telling Asa and David the other day that I'm preparing for a little trip. I live right next door to a rabid fan of Agent Orange, who right now has this giant banner hanging off of his house, has a life-size cardboard cutout. He gets drunk and walks up and down between our houses, cursing me and my wife and children, elementary age children, about who we are. And, I just ask him if he's feeling all right and should I call help, 911. Here's your emergency right here. But because he's very unpredictable, tomorrow after I pick the kids up from school, we are heading to a cabin in the old growth forest 2 hours from here because we need some space and distance to feel safe. And so that's something that we're doing. That's immediate. That's here in this life. I don't know what's going to happen here, and I also don't know what's going to happen in the big world. But I'm just doing this, and we're trying to think of it as, hey, we get to go out into the forest and wander around and have some quality time and hope whatever's happening settles down before we kind of need to come back and rejoin the world a little bit. So this is, it's a bit like whiplash, isn't it? This, stretching out to the world and coming back to our lives. And do you feel like this is part of why it's been so exhausting for so long? So, way before COVID and to continuing to this day, it just filters like a funnel into our lives, our immediate lives, and touches us in ways that I can't even imagine for some people with different statuses or identities that are even far more threatened than mine with my neighbor. What that must be like every day for years on end. So I think about that. Then I think about the way that our culture is changing and layering on, and thinking how difficult it is to escape that. So we've got macro structures, global news, we've got our own lives, and in the middle, we're just kind of peppered all the time with messages. And Asa, you're in a position where you're seeing this in print, in other kinds of media. How does that
Yeah.
impact you?
Yeah, I think that's um, one of the major pieces I've been thinking about. Of course, in my role in the library, I talk about information systems and information all the time. And the way that our information and media infrastructure has really evolved in the past, 15, 20 years with the internet and social media. And it does feel now that, previously you may have to seek out information, to become a well-informed uh, citizen and participate in civic discourse. And now it feels to me at least more like you have to develop filters and shields, and we're basically hit with just fire hoses of information all day, every day. And that can be really overwhelming. You can drown in it. You can have too much information. And I think with especially our presidential elections, they start to feel like this kind of overwhelming force that can take over your life in a way, and you can lose that perspective of, the my neighbors, my community, my neighborhood, what's going on here, the schools, and my county. Those things can kind of fall wayside to these big overarching macro stories of who's the head figure of the country. Um, I would say in our conversations, I think this came out a lot, but I'm very pulled in different directions, and I feel this tension of being overwhelmed with that information and feeling worried and scared. I also, just from a personal position, I'm a white male in Los Angeles, California. So one of the probably least threatened demographics when it comes to those major changes on the national level. But there is that tension of wanting to keep things in perspective, keeping aware of the people in my immediate surroundings and close to me, and how do we care for each other and, prepare for what's happening, but keep on with what the work we're doing. And then, maybe I should be planning an escape too, or maybe there's really bigger things at work that I don't want to ignore and look back and say, what was I doing the night before, this happened? And I don't know what what the answer is, but I definitely feel that tension. And David, I know you expressed a similar but a different tension around this idea of the prophetic and the priestly approaches to
Yeah.
what's going on. If you could explain
Yeah.
that more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Beth mentioned she's trained in sociology. Part of my training, a small part, is in social theory. And I've always found this distinction that the social theorist Max Weber made between the priestly and the prophetic helpful. And it goes, and this is what I've been struggling with, how to show up in here at this messy conversation and also just in general in life right now, as the priest or as the prophet. And what he meant by that was that that the priest, the priestly attends to the everyday, tends to the needs of the community, takes, make sure the lights are on and the sick are visited and, all of those kinds of things. And so you need the priest. The problem with the priest is that they get too caught up in the everyday and that they can lose um, a connection with their larger, what shall we call it, moral orientation in the world.
Mm.
And then that's the role of the prophet, right? The prophet is the one who stands outside of the everyday and is focused on that moral orientation um, of the world. Uh, but they're really lousy at the everyday. Like you never want to put the prophet in charge because they'll just run everything off a cliff. But in a way, you also don't want the priests in charge because they run the danger of losing their orientation. So you need both, was his point. You need both things going on. So I'm struggling with that. How to do both things and how to show up uh, in both roles at the same time. Yeah.
David, that description of the prophetic and the priestly reminds me a little bit of the dual roles of leaders. So, if we know anything about leadership we can take to the bank, it's based on mid 20th century research, largely on white men, that suggests that, if you're going to be effective as a leader, that is, get people to pull together in the same direction to get something done, you need to tend to both the task at hand and the relationships of with the people and among the people who are working together. So there's that almost that mission level of commitment, having a focus on the values and the people who are living the values, as well as the work that needs to get done. And that's another level of tension that I feel. It's not just micro and macro. It's okay, well, what's pragmatic, but what also do we aspire to? So, we think a lot of what's presented to us, you know, in campaign rhetoric is aspirational, and some of it is supposed to be plans or concepts of plans. And one of the things that we're not talking about, at least that I'm not hearing, is around what are we going to do next week? How do we begin to rehumanize the other so that we can engage in dialogues where we recognize each other and can start doing things that heal our communities and grow our communities? How do we let go of some of the anger or anxiety, and a lot of hurt and grief? So, of course, the outcome matters, but no matter the outcome, there are going to be a lot of people in pain over the outcome. And if we're to move forward, how are we going to start that moving? And David, you used a phrase, going visiting, when we talked the other day. Would you tell more about that, what that means to you?
Yeah, I would love to. I think that there's something else I need to do first, if that's okay. Um, or at least want to do first, because the way that you're laying it out, Beth, you know, part of our role is, well, how do we understand what it is? Um, and one discourse that I've been drawing on for a long time that's been really helpful to me, ever since Carol Pateman's book back in the, I don't know, late 80s, something like that, called The Sexual Contract. And she made a really interesting point in this book that the gendered nature of liberal democracies. And what does she mean by that? Well, she started talking about liberal democracies, the origin of liberal democracies as a shift from patriarchy to brotherhood. So rather, away from the absolute father and the divine right to brotherhood. And of course, the brotherhood is exclusionary. It's brothers, it's men, and then it's not all men. It's very particular men, and that the institutions that inform um, these new liberal democracies are gendered institutions, masculinized institutions, and I've found that very helpful way to, because you look at the Senate, you look at the presidency, you look at, all of those levels of government, they've traditionally been exceedingly uh, male and or masculine. Uh,
And white.
and then there's all these other organizations, affiliative organizations, Masons and Elks and veterans of foreign wars and all of that, and Sons of Poland and all of these, and it's really interesting the role that they've had. And then lately, I've been reading this other person, for Faree is her name, and she writes about the crisis of masculinity in these gender democracies, and says that what's going on from her perspective is that over the last few decades, we've been moving steadily away from that brotherhood model to what she calls a degendered partnership model. And so you think about all the work that feminists have done, for instance. So not only to get the vote, but also advances in the workplace and so on. And then you think about the massive, and education, you think about the massive cultural changes that we've seen. People forget that in many of our lifetimes, women couldn't have credit cards, women couldn't buy homes, women couldn't, all of these massive shifts in our culture around this, and resulting ultimately in a degendering of all of that. So we've also seen shifts around like marriage equality and so on. And that and she's describing this tension that's happening with us culturally. Those who want to hold on to that old model of masculinity and brotherhood, and those who are eager to move into a new model of partnership where, you know, gender is not all that important in the partnership. And so I'm finding that a really helpful way to think about what's going on right now and why people are holding on so tightly. And so much of the rhetoric that we're seeing, this misogynist rhetoric that we're seeing, among other kinds of rhetoric that are deeply troubling and a handmaiden's tale kind of way, as a like a last gasp attempt to grab onto and hold onto that old model versus this other model. And these are not just models and symbolic models. These are ways that we understand ourselves. These are our identities. These are our subjectivities. These are how we construct our values and make sense out of the world. And so these are deeply felt and held things, like your neighbor, Beth, that you're talking about, who's, spewing all of this stuff. Well, you're a threat to the brotherhood and to those traditional notions of masculinity. So I don't know if that's helpful as a framing, but for me, it's been really helpful.
I find that a kinder and gentler version of patriarchy than I've encountered in a while. and I'll have to think much more about that, because I've been in a place where I feel like men have, and this is based on I did what opportunity to do a great study of about 30 men who all identify as feminists in the sense that they are allies of women, and who were really struggling with how to be an ally, how to speak up without losing their man card with the brotherhood. And those were not the terms. That it was not couched in that sense of safety and familial relationship. It was, I'm going to be ostracized and get beat up. I had several men share that, hey, this code goes all the way back to the playground and it never goes away. That if you stick up too much, for women or for the wrong people in the wrong ways, then you're out. You've lost your power. And so I was chalking up a lot of what we're seeing to men losing power relative to women in the sense that in so many ways, if women have genuine equality of opportunity and they're exceeding men in education and in earning very often within marriages and some other places, and can reproduce without men, technology, men aren't needed. And that is an existential threat. And you get red pilling and these other sorts of reactions, like this is my right. And it's, so that violent reaction that is really counter to these ideals of a gentle brotherhood evolving into a partnership that brings along women and other groups of people. Uh, yeah, that's a different version, and it's going to take me some time to wrap my mind around that. I'll have to do some reading. So thank you, David. I appreciate that. Asa, I'm really interested in how this, not necessarily this conversation about gender and rights, but rights and ideals like democracy, and maybe this notion that everyone can have partnership in our country. How that resonates for you as somebody looking at what you're being offered as a voter and the contrasting ideals sometimes that it seems that we're getting in our choices. You
Yeah.
raised that the other day, and that was fascinating to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really is the issue for me when it comes to this election and voting of, how am I going to vote? And I won't get too specific, but the menu of options, there's not a pure reflection of my ethics, my moral stance. And I've been deeply disappointed with the current administration, the death and destruction we see in Gaza and Palestine, and the funding of it with American tax dollars. And that is something it feels bad to vote in favor of the people who have supported that. And at the same time, there is a balance of risk, reward, effort, I think is a big thing I think about with voting, where you have to give it the weight in proportion to the effort. That, you know, voting takes 15 minutes. You go, you pull a lever, you fill something out. It is the lowest level of participation in society. Like, it's the least you can do in a way. And then there's all the other time in the day and what you're doing with that to organize and push for your values and make a difference. So I think that does go back to the scale and scope thing of, you know, it's this huge issue, the national election. And at the same time, individually, it's a very tiny act to vote, to participate in the democracy. And I think I'm someone who came of age like with Obama and that election really being profoundly impactful on how I viewed things. And I worry about if if Kamala wins and, you know, there is Democratic control of the executive branch, that what happened with Obama will repeat, where it kind of, there's celebrations in the streets and then the pressure kind of wanes and we have a huge bank bailout. You know, there's no public option in the healthcare bill, all of these things that were really the darlings of the left, and that those kind of just fade away and we're like, oh, we got them in there, you know. So I'm kind of going off tangent a bit from, I think, what you asked, but that reflection, I think it can also be dangerous to have so much of our personal identities and to invest so much in political figures, individuals, rather than, you know, ethical stances, beliefs, even policies, party platforms, those types of things. But I think that's where we start to see the danger of slippage into the more fascistic, you know, a cult of personality, where you start to just go along with individuals because you identify with them rather than holding them to account.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that, but David, if I know we definitely talked about that when we were preparing, this idea of balancing, you know, our own beliefs and then how we enact that in democracy. And I think that does go back to the prophetic and the priestly, certainly. But yeah, if you have anything there.
Well, no, I just, for me, I tend to think of voting as an instance of instrumental rationality. And what I mean by that is that it's a tool, right? And it's a tool that ideally helps you move towards what you intrinsically value, right? That has intrinsic value, not utilitarian value or instrumental value, but intrinsic value. And so that's when I think, because I share a lot of the feelings and that you're describing, Asa, that, you know, this in many ways this is far from an ideal choice. And so, well, what do you do? But if your vote is an act of instrumental rationality, that it's a tool to get you closer to where you want to be, in the sense of your intrinsic values, then that makes sense. I know in having conversations with my partner, she talked about, well, you know, vote vote for who you want to fight with, right? Vote, in other words, vote for who you can work with, who you can push, who you can, you know, get them further down the line. Um, and don't vote for who you have no chance of of getting them any further down the line. So that helps me at least quell some of the anxiety and about, oh geez, there's no super good choice here, and they're all flawed, and do you throw your vote away, and you know, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
I did just want to bring in one more thing, and maybe I'll ask Beth about this too, is because you are in Pennsylvania, and so I'm sure you've been flooded nonstop with the ads, and you know that it seems like all the attention is on you there. And then, you know, out here in California, it's like the down ballot races we pay attention to, but you know, no one's campaigning in California for president. And there are these structural um, elements of our democracy that make it meaningful, and it weights the meaning of our votes in different ways. And that can be really disheartening, and can also make people jaded or feel like, well, you know, what difference does it make? And yeah, so what are your perspective on just kind of that, how you're feeling being in the swing state and it feeling so important that, you know, you do everything you can?
We
Yeah.
are so special here in Pennsylvania and Michigan and North Carolina. Yes. And I can only imagine how disenfranchising it must feel to be in, you know, either the assumed, you know, red or blue states, or in those flyover states that you mentioned, Asa. And it helps me to remember to focus on the power of the seat I'm in. So being able to think about, okay, you know, macro to micro, here we are again. You know, what is it that we can do here and now from the seat that we're in? And to me, this relates to what do we do next week? Instead of, you know, once the election is done, the votes are cast, you know, what is it we can do to to shift the culture, to make change? And one of the opportunities I feel like we might be missing as educators is to be able to put together some of the terrific knowledge that's coming out in neuropsychology and neurosociology. Who knew that was a thing? They didn't have that when I was in grad school. That's kind of fun. But so, you know, what we're learning and seeing from technological advances in brain imaging is how certain kinds of interactions get physically wired to, you know, different thought areas and feeling areas in our brain, and that helping us to understand that we have a propensity, a tendency to feel or think in certain ways about people who we perceive as similar to us or that we perceive as different, or what we learn from our culture is valued or not valued. So these aren't things that tell us that our evolutionary biology is destiny, but it tells us, oh, you have some things you're working against. Your brain is kind of wired to leap to conclusions about people based on information you have as categories, not as a person. You have to override that. You have to deliberately work at overriding that. And there are things that we can do in terms of our somatics, our breathing and our self-awareness of what am I feeling right now? What am I thinking about? Oh, hold on a minute. I just jumped to this assumption. Or, you know, I'm feeling a little queasy, so I feel things are kind of risky, and I'm more prone to interpret things as a challenge or a danger, and to be defensive or to interact in a way that's not how I want to show up. So we can, you know, we can learn this and work at that. We can make different choices in our interactions and in our community work, you know, planning out things that actually help to relax people, like sharing a meal together, like talking about shared interests, like doing something that feels no stakes, but sharing the task. There's a little book our library has this called Our Brains at War, but I don't like the title because it really should emphasize the subtitle, The Neuroscience of Conflict and Peace Building. We can wage peace. And this book, it's by Mari Fitzduff. I can see Ace is already looking it up. He's going to drop the link. But it's a very skinny little book, but it really helps bring together the neurology, the psychology, the sociology, some of the philosophy behind it, and actual things that we can do proactively, intentionally, so that we can show up and be in these engagements with our neighbors, with our organizations, with other people, more in ways that we might that are true to our values, that we might want to do, and that might bring about more healing and recognizing that people don't end up in these silos where we then dehumanize each other out of nowhere. There are really complicated processes at work, and so there are really complicated and long-term processes needed. A lot of work to be done to improve things, but it can be done. So that's giving me a little bit of hope at the moment.
Well,
Thank you
and
very much, Asa. You are fast on that. Thank you.
this is a good place to come back, and then we probably need to ask CN about questions that are in the chat. But to come back to your earlier question to me about going visiting,
Going visiting,
right?
yes.
Which is a phrase from Hannah Arendt, and many of the undergraduate students present here will remember reading a little Hannah Arendt in their Educational Foundations course. But she said, here's the quote, to think with an enlarged mentality means that one trains one's imagination to go visiting. And which is, to get out of your echo chamber, to get out of your box, to go visiting. And Donna Haraway, I'll say the great Donna Haraway, picked up on this and writes quite a bit about it, and says, for instance, that it's going visiting is not an easy practice. It demands the ability to find others interesting, even or especially others most people already claim to know all too completely, and to ask questions that others truly find interesting. And then my favorite part of it is to cultivate the wild virtue of curiosity. And so when we go back to, we're in a 50-50 split as a nation, and whether we buy that it's a gendered brotherhood thing versus a partner, moving into a different model that is wildly threatening to the masculine brotherhood, or not, whether we buy that or not, these are people we live with and need to understand. And the more tools that we can amass, and I find that particular tool helpful, like, oh, these are people stuck in the brotherhood, right? Stuck in certain notions of masculinity. They're highly invested in it, probably for good reason. In their personal lives, not philosophically, not politically, but there's something going on. Yeah, so I'll shut up and ask CN if there are questions in the chat.
Yeah, so far we have one. Ben, if you would like to share it yourself, feel free.
Oh yeah. Asa, earlier you mentioned about how much our media has changed, and how instead of going to seek out information, we now have to like parse through and filter, as you said, information. And I definitely relate to how overwhelming that can feel. And I was wondering if you have any tips of how to balance like genuinely having the desire to find information that you find meaningful, but also knowing when to be able to take a step back from the overwhelming feelings that can happen?
Yeah, that's a really great question that I wish I had a perfect answer for or a really nice solution. It's something I struggle with. I think, there's always a investment of your time and energy that you have to take stock of and see, how much is this, am I giving it too much weight in my life? Like, um, I think that the political side of things, especially this electoral politics, like when a lot of the cable news channels, when they're breaking down the, polling data, and it can start to almost feel like, it's hard to tell the difference sometimes between those and like ESPN, like a sports show where they're just talking about stats and, who's the greatest of all time or something. And it can be this kind of pointless exercise and keeping you wrapped with attention. And there is a one thing I'll just say my one piece of like advice that, or what I always try to do is thinking about the incentives of the media creators and the media system, that if you're watching something that the point is to keep you watching as much as possible, to not let your attention drift away. That's something to be wary of. That you are being used for ad revenue. And so the algorithms have made this even more difficult. TikTok, I think in particular, where it's really designed just to make sure you don't leave TikTok and you keep watching. Or Twitter is the same way. And just being able to pause and like take stock of your time. How long have you been doing this? How and take a breath and just turn it off, and then you can come back to it. And if there's still more information there that you don't have, you'll know at that point. But to not just let it kind of drown you in the sea. Yeah, that's all I've got. But I'm sure everyone here has techniques or strategies or approaches to media, because we all have to now. And I see Clarence has his hand up.
Well, I was holding on to two thoughts, but I'll hold on to those for a moment. But I'd like to first respond to what you just said, both you, Asa, and Ben. Being someone who used to work in media, when media had a certain amount of integrity, now we have major media owned by the same couple of people or owned by specific billionaire with specific interests. Makes it very, very, very difficult these days, especially when you look at the Washington Post as an example, and the New York Times, and even the LA Times. The recent incident about not endorsing someone based on, history and based on the norm. You have this dictatorial force that's above the editorial boards now. It used to be that the editorial board set the tone, and that is no longer the case. But we have now these platforms that are virtual, where you not only have to deal with the algorithms, as you said, Asa, but you have to now weed through and figure out what is a source of this information I'm receiving. Is this a credible source? And how do I find that out? So it becomes very difficult. We've already been warned these last 72 hours about, the Russia and the Iranian, their attack right now virtually, with a lot of disinformation and misinformation. So when you see these ads and you see these kind of, I know on Instagram, there are a lot of kind of content driven, specific, sometimes declarations that people give. So if this is coming from, let me just use an example. I don't know if you guys saw the one on social media where the Haitian guy had several IDs and he allegedly went and voted several times and he's an immigrant. That was all, of course, AI made up, doctored by some foreign source. So now, if you're in this particular news cycle, these next 72 hours, they're warning us there's going to be even more of that. So, how does someone who's maybe trying to make up their mind before tomorrow are bombarded with that kind of attack? It becomes more and more and more difficult. I myself kind of sort of know what to look for, but then I don't, especially in the virtual world from platform to platform. And I don't dare get on TikTok, Asa. I rely on people to repost TikTok in Instagram or in Facebook, which I'm not on that much. But what I'm trying to say really is we all have to be really kind of careful and try to use our third eye as we deal with media these days. But I want to quickly say, Asa, one correction. We have had presidential candidates out in California, who have been campaigning. Both of the electoral candidates have been here multiple times, fundraising and also making appeals and making engagements. So I don't know where you were, but one of them was right down the street from me a few weeks ago. But and then lastly, I just want to say, Beth, please take me to that cabin with you.
We haven't gotten more questions yet in the chat, but bring them on. I can take it, send them to me. But I mean, Clarence, what you just said is a question I kind of have lingering in my head. I don't know. We talk about like the day before and the day after is the title of this talk today. And I think that's because of plans, like distinct plans, both like plans in resistance. And I think Asa, like you really set the stage with that of like, regardless of the results, like essentially what we're voting for is what kind of landscape do we want to continue fighting in? Who do we want as a president as we continue to fight? And I think that's one part of the planning. And the other part of the planning too is like literally what you said, Beth, like what are we going to do to protect those around us, to protect ourselves, regardless of the outcome? So I think just like my question is like, anyone got plans you want to share?
Well, Ace pointed out in the chat, but I saw it too, that Lisa had
Oh,
her hand up.
oh, good.
Oh, it was you always have something to say, Lisa.
Lisa says that one was a mistake, but if you have something else to raise your hand about later, please do.
Well, on the issue that we were just talking about, right? On the other side of that, I guess the courts today refused to block Elon Musk's ability to pay people $1 million for registering or their vote or whatever he's paying them $1 million for. So there's that side of it as well.
Well, I want to address this after, whatever the results are after. First of all, we don't know when that's going to be officially because of, the different counting processes. So the news media is currently saying, speaking of media, that the earliest might be Thursday. But then, as you recall from Biden and Trump, it was like Saturday morning. And that said, then if it doesn't go in a certain direction, and then we have to revisit what happened January 6th, for me, there's going to be a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and a whole lot of depression. And I'm not going to know how to heal, Beth, because it would be the ultimate worst case scenario. And then I know that Kamala Harris was asked what are her plans if indeed she should win, and then the forces repeat itself from the last time, which we're already being set up that there are fraudulent practices going on in different, precincts across the country. And it's all been set up to say, they're stealing the election, they're stealing the election. So she responded by saying, we have an army of legal eagles waiting in the wings. And so if that becomes a reality, then it's like, how many months then will we have a result? And then will there be physical violence going on in between time? So there's a whole lot of reasons to have some kind of neuro approach to coping at this point. I'm trying to put together a survival kit. I don't know if that's self-medication or what, but I'm going to need help this week. Unless you can, fly me to Pittsburgh and we can go up in that cabin.
Clarence, you are so welcome to join me and my family in the cabin. And whatever you need to do in the moment to reassure yourself. I don't think it's a bad idea for people to have go kits, because if today it's politics, tomorrow it might be climate change, and some other kind. This is a world we're living in right now. And that whiplash back and forth between, okay, I'm secure right now in my house, but the rest of the world is burning down and it's coming to my door. And I think we have to do what we can within reason and rest when we need rest. I know we're Antiochian folks and we think we need to fix everything, right? How's that working for us? I don't know. I'm feeling tired. I think it's really good to be able to sort of embrace Audre Lorde and know that rest is resistance. There are times when we just can't do anything about it and we need to rest so that we can take our energy to the work that's right in front of us and stay with that. Where are our values and commitment? Where can we make the most difference? And so sometimes that means doing some of our own work around what are our priorities. We can't fight all the fights and all the battles, even if they're all just and worthy. So where are we putting our energy and what can we do and how are we going to take care of ourselves and our loves and our communities so that we can continue to do the work that matters most to us? And I think that is the most we can do. And sometimes we just step out of it and we need to make the world go away, zone into a movie, Netflix, whatever it is, and use somatic feedback and meditate or walk or whatever gets you breathing right again. Do that. Because we are physical, we are psychological, we are social, relational creatures. We need all of that. And we can take care of that for ourselves and for those around us. But that's the extent of a lot of what we can do. And the rest we can build together bit by bit. But it's work that takes a while. David's saying, yes, it takes a while. I see Lisa's
Yeah.
hand up.
Well, Sarah Beth, you had your hand up earlier, and I wanted to offer that back to you.
Yeah, I'm about to I was just gonna put this in the chat. I'll do it anyway. I saw this poster over the last week, and the link is in the chat there. And it was beautiful and also shocking. There's a McCarthy poster, and the cycle that it came from made me think it must be inspired by Picasso and that peace dove that became the symbol at the peace conference. And I think of my family is made up of community leaders. And so there was never a time in my growing up where you rested, because people were always coming to the house, or we were always, you know, in a gaggle going to theirs or to the hospital. My father was a pastor. And as an adult who's not a pastor, but who's a faculty member, and I try not to proselytize my genre of learning that's not about my faith, but certainly has inspired me to somatics, as you discussed, Beth. I love that. I like to look at these patterns and think about how a symbol can make us hold a mood or hold a sentiment or a feeling. And sometimes that helps us if it feels like we're just staying in survival mode all the time. And it feels like that for me right now. And to your points, Clarence, I am also worried about the violence and the things that we aren't speaking of necessarily, but might be holding, and also some really scary stuff that's happening here in Seattle. And I think of the ability of us Seattleites who mail in our ballots to not feel the same way as someone in a swing state might feel, where we can be different with our political attitudes and hold them closer. And also there's so much tech here that feels really scary and fraught, how much control such a small number of people with so much money are having an impact on this whole entire dynamic. Those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. I want to recognize that we have reached the 5 o'clock hour. So our practice is to release those of you who need to go at 5 o'clock. But we continue the conversation in an informal way going forward. And I notice there's a number of you. I see Jane's got something, and Lisa's hand has been up, and Kayla has something. So I hope you can stay and share those things, and we can extend the conversation for about 15 minutes. Remember, we won't be meeting next week because of the holiday, but we'll be back on the 18th to talk about the connection between racism and public health. I lost the order of things, Cian, but I think it was at Kayla.
Yeah, I think, well, Lisa's,
Oh,
I'm not sure if your hand raised is, or if you're still here. Yeah. Lisa, was your hand up on purpose
Yes,
this time?
yes.
Wonderful.
So the reason I put it back down is I am I don't know how to quite put this into words. But if you're familiar with bullfighting, if you're familiar with what happens to a bull when he starts internally bleeding, he in order to save himself, in order to continue on with the fight, he closes his mouth so that the blood remains inside and so that he can fight. And that's how I feel. I feel as though I am holding my mouth closed so that I can retain what fight I have, what life I have. This past year has been quite difficult with what is going on in Gaza, what that means about democracy, not just in Gaza, but the United States and the role that the United States is playing, and what that means about our democracy. And also in terms of how we're going to handle people living here, and not just citizens, but everyone that is living in the United States. What does that mean? If we have the ability to participate in genocide and famine and war, then what makes me think that that's also not going to happen here? David, you're absolutely right. When your partner said, "Who can you have that fight with?" You're right, and um, that is how I voted. Was who can I continue the fight with, and be able to have some sort of familiarity and dialogue with. I appreciate what you were saying, Beth, in terms of what Audre Lorde said. Rest is resistance, but I'm having a very difficult time resting. It feels as though that is not a part of my vocabulary nor my ability, because there are many Palestinians who are not able to rest, and I feel that. But I completely understand Clarence, and I agree. I am quite concerned about the violence that, not just verbal, but the seemingly violence that Trump is fomenting. I guess I didn't want to say all this because you sounded as though you were ending on such a positive note, Beth, that I didn't want to detract from that. But I guess, Sarah Beth, you gave me some courage to speak up, and I appreciate that very much. Also, I finished, but my mother, Connie, would also like to say something.
Thank you, Lisa. David, I agree with you what your partner said about vote for who you can push to go further down the line. But there's more than that involved. We have our voting to do. We're going to pieces, wondering what we're going to do. But I know what I already did. I already voted for Kamala because I agree with David. We can push and we can become active and we can do whatever we can. There's a bigger issue that we're not talking about, and that is something that concerns me a lot, and that is what is happening in Israel. The result of Israel is going to affect the world order. Our problem right now is democracy versus fascism. And what is happening in the Middle East is whether fascism is going to win out and be successful. That is what is happening. We don't talk about that. We can't talk about genocide. We can't talk about the Palestinians. We cannot talk about Zionism. We don't have the knowledge. A lot of us are not being taught. I do my own research. I give my daughter books to read. But how many people really are learning what Zionism means? What is happening in the Middle East? How many people read those books? That is my concern. We can do a lot of things proactively and everything. We're organizing ourselves to be better people, to go visiting, to visit our neighbors, to educate ourselves in psychological terms. But we're not talking about real activism, real organizing to stop this tidal wave that we're that we're seeing, this tidal wave of fascism that's coming our way, we're too afraid to speak. And we have to get rid of that fear and speak in a gentle way, in an intelligent way, and in a way that will embrace all of us. You know, there are the Jews for peace. We should embrace them, bring them into our community and become part of that group. There are many groups that are working for stopping fascism. And we should involve ourselves with that. And we should not be afraid to use the words that we have to use. They're not bad words. And it isn't anti-Semitism, anti-fascism. And yes, I'm going to vote I did vote for Kamala. And yes, I think, David, that we can push her and organize ourselves and we can go further down the path. I hope that's what it is. I hope she's not going to be part of the vetoing in the UN like Biden has been in the past, recent. And I agree with Clarence very much, Clarence. Thank you for speaking out.
I just want to say quickly, thank you to both Connie and Lisa for your voice here. And yeah, you know, the fascism is a tactic, is a strategy that's also rooted in that masculinist brotherhood kind of thinking. And you know, I'm conscious of, you know, we take a step or two forward in things, and then, you know, we can lose the gains that we've made. You know, think about in this country, following the Civil War, Reconstruction, we made some advances around race. And then what happens after Reconstruction? Just the constant push back, you know, Jim Crow, disenfranchised, all kinds of things. And I think we have that danger right now, whether it's in you know, fascism trying to take back advances that we've made here in our own country, with this election, the threats to take back the gains that we've seen towards partnership, towards a greater equality, more inclusiveness. Perfect? No, long way to go, but they're gains, and we stand on the brink of losing those. And I think we forget that, you know, what we've won, we can lose. So thank you again, Connie and Lisa, for bringing those points up.
There's been a couple of events posted or opportunities posted as well in the chat from Jane. It looks like there's going to be, I don't know if you want to speak to that yourself at all, the vigil.
Hi. No, I was just posting that because I know I'm going for a period of time. This just seems to be something that's organized to help people get through the day. It goes all through the night. And as some of you probably know, that's a social justice-based organization. I would call it a church, but it's the most unchurched church I've ever known. So, lots of caring people, and if somebody wanted a place to be with other people, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Kayla had something too, right?
Yes, yeah, Kayla did also share about at the Santa Barbara campus. It looks like there's going to be an opportunity for reflection collage, the creation of a community collage piece capturing the feelings around the election. So yeah, if people are in the area, that sounds powerful.
Is this a weekly forum? This is the first time I've been on it. Is it just for today or is it?
No, Jane, it's nice to see you, and we've been doing this for about 4 years, most Mondays, not all Mondays, but most Mondays we gather. And you probably no longer have an Antioch email account, so that's probably why you're not
No,
receiving
Rosa told me about it at the bridge
Mm-hmm.
celebration, so that's why I'm here. So thank you, Rosa.
I'm gonna add you. We're gonna add you to the mailing list because you attended means that you are interested and keep coming. So the
Okay.
door is open.
Okay, thanks.
And it's always the same Zoom link, Jane.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So nice to see you, Jane, and everybody else. But Jane has been a while that I haven't seen.
There are other comments that people have, or questions, or critiques of what we've been doing, or all things are welcome here.
Well, that said, can you just inform me about what it is that happens here in the conversation? I mean,
Yeah, we can give a very short thing. So, we started Messy Conversations a little over 4 years ago following the murder of George Floyd. Those of us that began it believed that Antioch, the community at Antioch needed a place to come together and talk about race and racism and anti-racism, both more generally and then also for us as an institution. How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we improve the work that we're doing? What are our shortcomings? So most weeks, race is the central focus of our conversation. And each quarter we run usually between 6 and 8 messy conversations on Mondays at 4 o'clock Pacific time. If there's nothing else, just a couple of closing things. One, to thank Beth, who is in the embattled state of Pennsylvania, and it's later there, approaching 8:30, I think. But thank you so much, Beth, for coming and joining us and sharing all the things that you did today. As always, thank Asa, who's also part of the Messy Conversations planning team and does so much for us in so many ways, both within Messy Conversations and for Antioch more generally. We're extraordinarily lucky to have you, Asa. And then also for all of you that showed up. And it's just good to be together on this election eve. And we appreciate all the ways that you participate. Last time, I'll repeat this, no Messy Conversation next week because of the holiday, but we'll be back on the 18th to look at racism as a public health issue. And Clarence will be leading that conversation with 2 guests whose names escape me at the moment. So we hope to see you then. And as always, please bring a friend. We got lots of room. And we've noticed this quarter our numbers have been down a little bit. So we're trying to revive interest in Messy and get those numbers back up. But thank you so much for being here today.
And thank you,
David.
Kayla. Thank you, Kayla, for your information about the campus in Santa Barbara, posting posters with questions about election, your lunch. Thank you for sharing that tool.
Thank
Of
you.
course.
Good evening.
Thank you.
And then Jane, this space now is just going to be